Today on an all-new Dr. Phil.
Why would anyone use the symbolism of a noose to make false accusations?
The Jussie Smollett story.
Did he get caught, or is the jury still out here?
Look, Dr. Phil, he has some big problems.
Jussie Smollett figured he was going to get away with this, otherwise he wouldn't have done it.
A lot of things need to be researched, and I want to give him the benefit of the doubt.
Accused of filing a false police report.
He's talking about a vicious hate crime where he felt his life was in danger. Why is he smiling?
Jussie maintains his innocence.
TMZ posted a quote, "I swear to God I did not do this."
We investigate.
Whenever they say, "I swear to God," almost always, next thing out of their mouth's a damn lie.
This is what made Dr. Phil an amazing jury consultant.
Today's going to be a changing day in your life. You've never had anybody working harder to bring you to the threshold of change than right now. Well, I'm sure by now you have all heard about Jussie Smollett, the talented singer and actor from the hit Fox drama Empire. This beloved actor appeared to be on top of the world until he was charged with felony disorderly conduct for filing a false report claiming two unknown assailants attacked him while using racial and homophobic slurs. Now, Jussie denies all allegations and stands firm with his claim of being a victim of a hate crime, a crime he says happened in the early hours of January 29th.
Brutally attacked. Jussie Smollett, one of the stars of the hit show Empire, has been hospitalized after a possible hate crime.
Jussie Smollett said two men attacked him, hurled racial and gay slurs to him, and then tied a noose around his neck.
Smollett revealed that he is working with authorities and has been 100% truthful.
Chicago police say, quote, given the severity of the allegations, we're treating it as a possible hate crime.
Police released images this week of two people who appeared to follow him. Now, another security camera captured the actor returning to his apartment with a noose around his neck.
Authorities are still trying to figure out, was Jussie the victim of an attack, or did he plan the entire thing?
On one hand, there are a lot of people showing him sympathy. On the other, a lot of unanswered questions.
Right now, there's no reason for us to think that what he's described to us isn't, in fact, what happened. It's a horrendous, terrible thing.
But as the police continued their investigation, the story took a sharp turn.
Was it a hoax? A shocking new twist tonight in the alleged assault of Jussie Smollett.
We've learned that the two men being questioned are brothers.
The Nigerian brothers say the Empire actor orchestrated the whole thing.
One of the brothers is connected to Smollett through the hit show Empire, where he played a prisoner.
WBBM is citing sources that the brothers were paid $3,500.
If what these brothers are saying is proven to be true, this doesn't just make the alleged victim now the culprit. It makes him someone who planned out and orchestrated a hate crime.
But Jussie Smollett continues to push back, saying again tonight he was not involved in orchestrating the attack.
Smollett is under arrest and in police custody.
Defendant Smollett wanted Ola to place a rope around his neck, pour gasoline on him, and yell, "This is MAGA country."
Why would anyone, especially an African-American man, use the symbolism of a noose to make false accusations?
Smollett has been charged with disorderly conduct for filing a false police report.
The fall of an Empire star. Actor Jussie Smollett. He surrendered to Chicago police today after posting a $100,000 bond. The head of the police department accused Smollett of staging a publicity stunt using, quote, the pain and anger of racism to promote his career.
As for those ringing words of support for Smollett from entertainment and political luminaries right after the incident, they're few and far between now, as Smollett posted his bond, surrendered his passport, and walked the humiliating walk out of the Cook County Jail.
Jussie Smollett is being cut from the final two episodes of this season of Empire.
If convicted, Jussie Smollett faces a fine of $25,000 and a prison sentence of up to 3 years.
I grew up in the tail end of the civil rights era, and the symbolism of a noose is very offensive. That's a damaging thing to do to a city and to a police department. And I just hope people don't judge other folks that are victims of these types of crimes, because this is just one particular incident.
Well, let's remember, Jussie is innocent until proven guilty. However, I noticed what I believe are questionable things with some of his reported statements and videos out there, and I'm going to give you my thoughts about that soon. But first, I want to know what you think. How many of you here today believe that Jussie planned his own attack? Raise your hands. Okay, that's almost probably 70%, I'm guessing. Well, let's take a closer look at the timeline of Jussie's story with TMZ's Harvey Levin, who has been staying on top of the details minute by minute. What's going on here? Did he get caught, or is the jury still out here? What's your best guess?
I think there is a lot of evidence suggesting that Jussie Smollett staged this, but there is also other evidence. And Dr. Phil, you know at least as well as I do, because of what you used to do with jury consulting, that it is never over until there's a trial. And we found out something over the weekend that is really interesting. You heard the police superintendent say in that news conference last week that Jussie paid these two brothers $3,500 to stage an attack. Well, we have obtained the check and various text messages between Jussie and one of the brothers, and it suggests something different, that $3,500 was not to pay them for an attack. It was for personal training. These guys are personal trainers. Jussie had a music video shoot where he needed to lose 20 pounds, and you look at the texts and you look at the check, and he had hired them to get him in shape. And the reason that I'm raising this, and Dr. Phil, you know this so well, that all somebody like Jussie Smollett has to do if this goes to trial, all he has to do is create a reasonable doubt. And if he can show, say that the police superintendent made a statement where the check shows otherwise, you know, this is the way O.J. Simpson ended up getting off, where you cast doubt, and it may be you still believe it, but not enough to convict. So I don't think it's over.
Do you know if the brothers did, in fact, as CPD says, tell them that they were paid to do the attack, and that, in fact, they did go buy the ski mask, hats, rope, and bleach for the attack with the $100 that he gave him? Do you know if they did tell that to the CPD?
I believe they told them about the $100 for sure. I think the issue is, what did they say about the $3,500?
Well, TMZ posted a quote about what he said to the crew at Empire. And it says, quote, "I'm sorry I've put you all through this and not answered any calls. I wanted to say I'm sorry, and you know me. I would never do this to any of you. You are my family. I swear to God I did not do this."
And we confirmed that with his people, too. I mean, look, Dr. Phil, he has some big problems here. Because remember, he told the police that he saw the attackers and they were white. And I don't think these guys are mistaken for white. And, you know, he's got to reconcile that, because that would go with law enforcement saying he wanted to create a profile of somebody, a MAGA supporter, the whole thing, and it just wasn't the case.
Well, Harvey, before I let you go, I wanted to point out, you know that I've spent a lot of my career in deception detection, determining whether people are telling the truth. And there are some very classic lie behaviors. And one of them is what we call convincing statements, like, "You know me. I would never do this." And then one of the biggest flags of all, "I swear to God." Whenever you're talking to somebody and they say, "I swear to God," almost always next thing out of their mouth's a damn lie. Okay?
Oh my God. For all the people in your audience who are listening, this is what made Dr. Phil an amazing jury consultant, because he could read people, and half of the battle is reading people and then developing a case around it.
There are some real red flags here that...
And I agree with you. Plus, the brothers are testifying he did this. That's what we were doing. We scoped out the location in advance. We saw a camera. We planned this out. We did a fake attack. So there's a ton of evidence.
What do you think about him being cut from the last 2 episodes of Empire?
It doesn't surprise me at all. I think the question is what happens next season, and I think we're probably going to know the result of this whole trial by then.
Well, Harvey, thank you, my friend. And you know where to find TMZ online and on the air. Harvey, thanks for being here. Jesse has already faced much criticism without being found guilty of any crime. What I observed about this behavior, we'll be right back.
This announcement today recognizes that Empire actor Jussie Smollett took advantage of the pain and anger of racism to promote his career. I'm left hanging my head and asking why. Why would anyone, especially an African-American man, use the symbolism of a noose to make false accusations? How could someone look at the hatred and suffering associated with that symbol and see an opportunity to manipulate that symbol to further his own public profile?
Well, joining us now from New York, where he hosts his own radio show, SiriusXM Urban View, is journalist and author Clay Cane. And then here with me is Ben Shapiro, host of The Ben Shapiro Show. So let me start with you, Ben. Do you believe him? And if not, why would he do this?
I mean, I don't believe him. I think the Chicago superintendent has made clear why we should not believe him. There are a lot of questions about the story from the very beginning. I mean, the original story is that he went out at 2 a.m. in the middle of a polar vortex in Chicago to go get a Subway sandwich. He was on camera this entire time, and then he disappears for a minute. When he reemerges from the cameras, he suddenly has a noose around his neck. He's been hit with bleach, but he's still holding the Subway sandwich. And one of the big things I think that's problematic with how the media treats this sort of stuff is that if you asked questions at the beginning, there was a sort of pushback. Don't ask questions, don't ask questions. We must believe all people who make allegations. And I'm fine with believing initial allegations, but you do have to ask evidentiary questions when questions arise.
Well, absolutely. Now, Clay, you say that hate crimes are personal to you. Tell me why.
Well, as a black gay man who grew up in Philadelphia, I had so many experiences that may not have made sense to other people. It may have been bizarre, it may have been strange, but friends that I knew, being assaulted, being killed, this was almost normal where I grew up. So when I initially heard the story from Jussie, I had compassion. I was saddened to hear that this may have happened. And I understand why folks are skeptical, but I do believe that he deserves due process.
There is a lot of evidence on both sides, correct?
Absolutely. Sure there is. I mean, there's no doubting that. But, you know, here's the thing. I have seen police officers, with all due respect to law enforcement, I have family who are part of law enforcement, but I've seen police officers shot and kill unarmed black children on camera, and they got due process, and they weren't convicted. So my only thing is to ask for, if Jussie did this, it's deplorable, it cannot be defended. But let's give him the kind of due process that we give a police officer who shot and kills a young unarmed black man on camera in Chicago.
And Ben, you don't disagree with giving the man due process, right?
Of course, everybody should have due process. One of my big objections here is that immediately upon Jussie Smollett telling his story, you had two presidential candidates among the Democrats, Cory Booker and Kamala Harris, both come out and call it a modern-day lynching without calling for more information, without calling for due process. His story, again, was full of holes, not just in the timeline, but the very notion that there were two MAGA-hatted white guys walking around at 2 a.m. in Chicago, which is an extraordinarily democratic city. And they were shouting, "This is MAGA country," while trying to hang a guy they watched on Empire.
Right here, what Ben just said is not true. Jussie Smollett never said they were wearing MAGA hats. So do you see how quickly the
He said they were wearing red hats, and that they were shouting, "This is MAGA country."
Ben, you're wrong. He only said MAGA country. There was nothing about wearing a red hat. Trump came out as well. Trump said that this is the worst thing ever. So it wasn't just Democrats. People defaulted to compassion. People defaulted to having sincerity, and there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of things need to be researched. I want to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Hate crimes are one of the most underreported crimes in America. Like 50%, statistics tell us 50% of the victims don't report the crimes. And statistics also tell us that a high percentage of those that report the crimes are, in fact, telling the truth, and they are verified once they're looked into. So I certainly don't want this to cause people that are victims of hate crimes to not come forward and exercise their right to protection and due process.
Let's not make it bigger to what it actually is, right? He stands on his own. He doesn't speak for every black LGBT person. But if you don't believe a victim of a hate crime, that is your own issue. That is not Jussie Smollett's fault.
And Ben, my point is that most of the hate crimes that are reported turn out to be true.
Well, that's true. What I am a little bit afraid of in this country right now is the believe all victims mentality that immediately suggests that as soon as someone makes an allegation, the allegation is tantamount to a believable story in 100% of circumstances.
I wrote down your quote here because I thought it really brought it all to a head. You said, our current social media environment is constructed to amplify those who jump to conclusions most quickly and to penalize those who wait. We're outraged by people who say they want to wait for information to come out, since that reaction supposedly demonstrates insufficient deference to the narrative itself.
Exactly. Why don't we believe all victims is the idea. So Jussie Smollett comes out with his story, and let's say somebody says, listen, happy to hear your story, but I don't have all the evidence yet, so I'm going to wait on whether I think this is true or not. Then people jump in and they say, well, why aren't you believing all victims? It's exactly the sort of thing that makes hate crime victims not come forward. Well, if we do that, then we are going to get an incentive for people to jump to conclusions, and what that creates is an incentive for people like Jussie Smollett to lie, because Jussie Smollett figured he was going to get away with this, otherwise he wouldn't have done it. He figured, if it turns out that it's a hoax, that he was going to get away with it, and that he was going to do so to the vast acclaim of an enormous number of people who want to claim that there are a lot of people in America who are out to get people like Jussie Smollett. And the idea was if anybody questioned, then he was going to do what he did with Robin Roberts on GMA and suggest that all questions about his case were indicative of a deep-seated American racism. It's an unprovable argument, but one that benefits him.
Well, we're going to talk to a member of the media who feels the media must handle all hate crimes with skepticism. We'll be right back. Hate crimes are real. They do exist. Unfortunately, so do hate crime hoaxes.
Students have reported at least 4 racist notes on Drake University's campus. One of the girls admitted to making the note. Now police are saying at least one of them was a hoax.
Search is over tonight for the person who vandalized a car. These images of Williams' car went viral on social media. The FBI were investigating the incident as a hate crime. The car's owner now says he did it.
They kept saying, you don't belong here. They were like, oh, look, it's a terrorist. Take that rag off your head.
That was the account from 18-year-old Yasmin Saweed when she claimed she was the victim of a hate crime on the 6 train. She was questioned again. Investigators say she confessed the story was a lie, something she made up to get out of a, quote, family problem.
A church was vandalized with words like Heil Trump.
People here in Brown County feared it was a hate crime committed by perhaps the KKK.
But it turns out it was an inside job.
In a 3-page handwritten statement, Stang, according to court records, wanted to mobilize a movement. I suppose I wanted to give local people a reason to fight for good, even if it was a false flag.
Well, joining us now are columnist and editor of Quillette, Andy Ngo, and activist and author, The Opposite of Hate, a field guide to repairing our humanity, Sally Kahn. So thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Andy, you have followed a lot of the hate crime hoaxes. Where do you come down on this now in this particular situation?
I think the story is emblematic of an illness in America where we worship victimhood above heroism, bravery, kindness. This ideology has seeped into mainstream society and culture.
And you say that hate crimes are not common at all.
What's more helpful to look at, and particularly when you break it down per capita, and you're looking really at the single digits per million.
Well, it may be a small percentage, but if it happens to you, it's 100%. Now, Sally, you say we're a country that's built on hate, and explain what you mean by that.
The fact is, look, we have histories of hate in our country, not because we chose them, right? But we're a nation that was born through wiping out a genocide of Native Americans. We're a nation that was literally and physically built by abducting and enslaving Africans. That's our history, and it leaves an imprint in our laws, in our society, in our culture, in our hearts, and in our minds, and that comes out in ways that we should all be outraged about.
You're exactly right if you're talking about victims, but as the police spokesman for Chicago PD was saying, if this is a hoax, this is a real disservice to those that truly are victims of hate crimes.
The Chicago Police Department is not exactly the most trustworthy reporter here. We know, for instance, that they covered up for a year the police murder of an unarmed black man. So I think it's right we should wait for all the facts. And what's unfortunate about this moment in our society is the Twitterification of everything, where we all have our sides and we just pick the facts that fit our side and we get outraged in any excuse to bash the other side and forget about the real human suffering. But we're using this to perpetuate, as Clay said, larger problems in our society that we should all be trying to fight.
But oddly enough, Sally, I think that we agree on this. I really don't think that anybody in the room is less likely to now believe a person who claims a race crime. And as far as the notion that America is deeply riven by hate and that victims are constantly being blamed and this sort of thing, Jussie Smollett, according to CPD, he did this because he figured he was going to make more money off of being a victim.
And the problem is when we lose our compassion and our capacity to care about each other because we're advancing our political agendas.
I agree with everything you're saying about compassion, but I'm not hearing any compassion for the CPD. I'm not hearing any compassion for the two people that presumably Jussie Smollett would have been willing to send to jail falsely by implicating them in a crime that he presumably, and is now accused of, helping to pay for. All cases should be treated for evidentiary value, and that the media do an unbelievably crappy job of covering all of this in narrative-driven fashion.
Clay, final comment before the break.
I had a friend of mine when I was young who was attacked. He had his face beaten into the pavement. He was kicked, he was punched, and people walked by, they didn't come to his aid. And when I spoke to him, I said, why don't you call the police? And I'm gonna use some harsh language here. He said, they're not gonna believe a black like me. So I think you have to really humanize this cultural war that we're in. No one can win in this war of ideology. When you make the narrative fit you according to the tweet that you see.
All right, why does someone lie about a hate hoax? When we come back, we're gonna meet a woman who said she had reasons when she reported to police that alleged Trump supporters attacked her. We'll be right back.
It was election night. We had these three white boys throwing rocks at us, yelling the word, yelling "Make America Great Again." These detectives had the nerve to tell me that they didn't think I was black enough to be attacked.
We were talking this hour about the mystery that has left viewers baffled. Did Jussie Smollett lie about being the victim of a hate crime? Now everyone is asking, if he did, as he must be presumed innocent until proven otherwise, why would anyone create a crime hoax? Well, unfortunately, my next guest, Ellie, says she can relate.
Just over 2 years ago, it was election night. I was a 23-year-old university student. I was studying pre-law. When it was announced that Donald Trump had won the election, I was very upset. I threw back beers like crazy. I was very intoxicated. On my way home, I was planning on stopping and purchasing some drugs. I'm biracial, and the two guys that I met up with, they were very dark-skinned. The next thing I know, we had these three white boys throwing rocks at us, and there was also like pebbles thrown, so it was almost like a rain. Yelling the word, yelling "Make America Great Again." Next, the guys, he started pushing us. I had bruises on the sides of my neck. I got hit in the chest. When I got home, I just posted it on social media. When I woke up the next day, my post went viral. I went to the police. I lied to those detectives about the location and the time that I was attacked. I ended up changing my story a couple times because I didn't want them to find out that how intoxicated I was and that I was planning on buying drugs. Because I lied, the police just didn't believe me from the get-go. These detectives had the nerve to tell me that they didn't think I was black enough to be attacked. I felt like things could not get any worse.
Okay, Ellie, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You just said something that I'm having trouble wrapping my head around. You said, the police just didn't believe me because I lied.
What I was saying was, I lied about the time and the place because I thought I was in a more unsavory position when the actual attack happened. So I did lie about the time and the place. But I gave them thorough descriptions of what those boys look like. They asked me for things like, they wanted to see what clothes I was wearing. So I did tell them I was wearing something different than what I was. But when I asked them if they wanted the actual clothes I was wearing, they shook it off.
If you lie to the police, if they say, okay, here's a girl that says, I was drunk, and then says, well, actually, I lied about this and this and this, don't you think human nature is going to be that you lack credibility?
I totally understood. I think what hurt the worst was they told me that the bruises on my neck weren't real, even though I was examined at the police station when I filed the report. And they told me that I put it on with makeup.
Dr. Phil?
Yes.
I don't think it's any small detail that you lied about the time and the place. I mean, innocent people could have been arrested for this. Last year, we had an incident in Illinois where a 5-year-old black girl said that a white man called her a racial slur. Well, the police canvassed the neighborhood and arrested a black man. The whole story was a lie that she made up with her friends. So let's also think about the victims who get falsely accused, or they somehow might match a description and get arrested. That's the other part of the story that we're not talking about.
Look, we know that most crimes, when they are reported, are true. And I think the larger problem is when we are picking and choosing hate crimes and either believing them, not believing them, expressing outrage, not expressing outrage, depending on which side we're on and which narrative they serve, as opposed to acknowledging the reality of hate.
Okay, Sally, but they do boil down into individual instances, and then it is on us as rational human beings to determine whether those individual incidents happened exactly the way they said they happened. If social justice trumps individual justice no longer matters. If the narrative matters more than what happens in a specific case, then individual people are hurt. So if you care about people, you should be worried more about evidence and less about the narrative.
Okay, what are some of the real reasons why people make up a hate crime? I'll tell you what I think when we come back. Why is he shaking his head no when he's saying it's just the truth? He's just simply showing consistent clusters of lie behavior. We've been talking this hour about Jussie Smollett's case that has shocked and divided the nation about how they feel regarding both real hate crimes and hate crime hoaxes where the alleged victims make false claims. Now, Good Morning America's Robin Roberts sat down with Jussie to talk about the alleged attack. Now, many people felt his behavior during the interview was questionable, and I have to say that Jussie Smollett showed a lot of deceptive behavior during this interview. If he's not lying at these particular points, then he sure looks like he's lying at these particular points. Let's roll the tape and we'll take a look.
What is it that has you so angry? Is it the attackers?
It's the attackers, but it's also the attacks.
At this point, he's talking about a vicious hate crime where he felt his life was in danger. At 2 in the morning, he's attacked by 2 people that are throwing toxic chemicals on him, putting a noose around his neck, and threatening his life. Why is he smiling? This is what's referred to as duping delight, which means taking pleasure in getting something over on someone. And then at 12 minutes in, we see this.
I think that what people need to hear is just the truth.
Okay, he says, people need to hear it's just the truth. Why is he shaking his head no when he's saying it's just the truth? He's just simply showing very consistent clusters of lie behavior. He's contradicting himself throughout. So why does somebody lie about a crime like this? Well, they tend to lie because they feel victimized overall. They feel like, I am generally victimized by the system, so this event that I'm reporting, while not specifically true, is emblematic of how I am generally treated by the system, so it is not a lie.
And actually, a lot of hoaxers don't even think that what they're doing is wrong. Right. I mean, a lot of what Sally was saying here was really about the larger narrative, the larger story about bringing attention to hate in America and the climate of hate. So as long as we still find a silver lining or justification for hoaxes, we're going to continue to incentivize it.
The problem is somebody on the other end of that hoax is held accountable and pays a price for something they didn't do.
And that's the problem. You're right. Hoaxes are horrible. They're crimes, they should be prosecuted, and they will be. And the problem is that we don't need hoaxes to dramatize the issue of hate in this country. It's already a problem, and it is. One is too many, and there's suggestions that there are as many as 250,000 hate crimes, most of which are unreported in this country. That's the problem, and I hope we're all against it.
Well, it's fascinating to watch which trends get highlighted by the media, and the Jussie Smollett case is a good example of the trends that are highlighted by the media. The same night that Jussie Smollett claimed this happened, the same night there was a Jewish man walking in Brooklyn who was wearing payas, which are the side locks, and the yarmulke, and he was beaten on tape. Okay, there was actual tape of this happening. Why exactly has this not received national media attention? Well, the New York Times explained in an October 2018 piece. They said the reason we have not covered this in depth is because we couldn't find a clear trend in the attackers, meaning that they couldn't find a single instance in which it had been a white supremacist. So in other words, when there's a narrative that the media wish to push, which is that there's a vast upsurge in white supremacism in the United States, the media want to believe that this is because of President Trump's election particularly, even though hate crime statistics have been rising year on year, 2015, 2016, 2017, and now 2018. Because of that, what happens in New York is not of relevance. What happened to Jussie Smollett was of massive national relevance.
I think that's not fair. I think it's because he was a celebrity, and we pay an insane and unhealthy amount of attention to celebrities in this country. But the truth is, look, this isn't the oppression Olympics, Ben. Anti-Semitic crimes are awful, and homophobic crimes are awful, and racist crimes are awful, and Islamophobic crimes are awful, and they're all rising. We're going to take a break, and we're going to
meet someone who served time for doing just exactly that. He served time for being a person that committed a real hate crime. We're going to talk to him when we come back. We got all sides of this issue. We'll be right back. There was a point at which you realized the gravity of what you were doing in labeling people and defiling their homes. At some point, this weighed heavily on you, and you, in fact, shot yourself in the head.
His words were angry and his actions considered a hate crime. Wednesday, Raymond Stevens pleaded guilty to a felony count of criminal mischief for writing racist graffiti on the homes of African refugees in Concord.
Now, Ray spent time in prison for criminal mischief when he spray painted hate messages on an African immigrant's home. Now, Ray, thank you for being here, by the way. Because it'd be a whole lot easier for you to not be here, to just kind of stay in the background. There was a point at which you realized the gravity of what you were doing in labeling people and defiling their homes and all, correct?
I just always gravitated towards the wrong group. I would drink, and I'd find myself out on the streets 3 in the morning, acting out on something I saw in my local society, wherever I happen to be in the world, and lash out in the ways of graffiti. I'm nonviolent, never was violent, but I would want to get my message out there.
And so you went to prison for this?
8 months in New Hampshire, yeah.
Uh-huh. And at some point, this weighed heavily on you, and you, in fact, shot yourself in the head.
Ultimately, yeah, because I've been suicidal my whole life, struggling with depression, and I saw the prison case coming, and, you know, I thought I could beat it, but at the same time, you know, I didn't want to, I wasn't ready to admit yet. Obviously, I was still in that state of mind. But I think I've come away with it, having been able to find the church, and the Lord has found me, and praise Jesus, Christ, our Savior. I'm back on the right path, and that's you know, the path I've found to be most ideal to cure me of those hateful desires and triggers that I was dealing with.
You now look back and clearly see what you were doing was wrong.
Very much so, yes.
What do you say to people now that are out there wanting to do that kind of thing, wanting to do these hate crimes? What do you say to those people?
I'd hope they'd take a lesson from me and see how much I had lost, but by going the hard road, by thinking I was above all that, and that really today the only true answer is like what we're doing right here on your fine show, is that is a civil and honest discussion between all factors, people that stand at all ends of the aisles, you know,
Yeah,
whether far right or left or somewhere in between.
That's well said. We have to go to break, and I want to be sure that I underline something that Ellie said before, because I don't want it to get lost in the shuffle. We were talking about the fact that when you lied to police, you lost a lot of credibility. But the bottom line for you was, stories aside, you're not saying it's okay that I lied. No. I'm just saying I did change my story, but I offered physical evidence. Don't believe me, just look at the evidence, and they wouldn't do that. And that's your point.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to be sure that that didn't get lost in the shuffle. All right, look, if you are a victim of a real hate crime, find out what you should do when we come back. We've talked to victims of hate crimes. We've been talking to perpetrators of hate crime. We've talked about the hoax side of it, the real side of it. I've tried to give this a full 360 conversation. Clay's a bit of a disadvantage because he's on satellite here. So is there something you want to add?
I do want to add something. I want to say that with all this talk of hate crimes, they're real for Black LGBT people. But I want folks out there to know, young people out there to know, that with all of that said, I want to quote Zora Neale Hurston, I am not tragically Black. I am not tragically gay. My life has joy. I have a great career. I have a great relationship. And I am very blessed to be where I am. So if you're out there and you're struggling with your identity, just know that you can make it out on the other side. And here I am now on the Dr. Phil show, considering where I'm from. So I want to make sure that narrative is out there. Yeah. It is not a dark, dismal life being a Black LGBT person. I am lucky and proud to be who I am, and I wouldn't change it.
Well, thank you for saying that. And as you were just saying, having been on the dark side of this, I think we have had a very civil conversation about this whole thing here. And, you know, whether Jussie is telling the truth or whether he's not, I don't know. There's a difference between being found not guilty and being innocent. And maybe he'll be found not guilty. Maybe he's innocent. We don't know. Due process is unfolding at this point. I have more confidence in Chicago PD than maybe others do. I am clearly a supporter of law enforcement, but I do recognize there are bad apples in every barrel. And there are people out there, men and women, who stand in the gap every day to protect all the rest of us. And God bless them for doing it, because if they didn't, we'd be in a lot of trouble. But look, we've been talking about hate crimes, hate crime hoaxes, and why people lie. In fact, I'm talking about this in one of my podcasts, Fill in the Blanks, that you can catch now, called How to Spot a Liar. How much do people lie?
First of all, everyone lies. The way I break it up is there are high-stakes lies and low-stakes lies. The high-stakes lies are less common, but they're very high stakes.
What causes people to lie?
We lie to avoid conflict. We lie sometimes to manipulate someone, to have power over someone. We lie to gain the admiration of others. We lie oftentimes to protect privacy. There's a saying in Texas, for every rat you see, there's 50 you don't. If I catch somebody in a lie about one thing or two things or three things, I always assume there's 50 things I'm not seeing that they're lying about. You know, one study was done, and do you know what one of the most common resume lies was? Claiming to be a member of the Kennedy family. You're kidding. No, what were they thinking? Well, that was Pamela Meyer. She is one of the leading deception detection experts in the world today, and it is a very interesting and timely conversation. I want to thank all of my guests today. A very special thanks to my friend Harvey Levin of TMZ, radio host and journalist Clay Cane, editor-in-chief of the Daily Wire, author and host of his own show, Ben Shapiro, editor of Colette, Andy No, and author and political commentator Sally Kahn. You may find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget to watch that podcast I was talking about. You're going to learn more about ways to detect lying behaviors in others. And listen, if you are a victim of a hate crime, go to drphil.com. We're going to have all the information there of where you can report these things. And believe me, most crimes that are reported are true, and therefore most crimes reported are believed. So don't think you're going to meet skepticism when you report a crime. If you're the victim of a hate crime,
Talk about it. It needs to be dealt with, and you deserve to be properly handled in that situation. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much.